Welcome to episode 240 of the Reptile Gumbo podcast. We have Jack back. He still hasn't gone back to the Netherlands. He's deciding on whether he wants to move here forever because he likes our way of measurements.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, he said screw kilograms. That's how it makes sense.
Yeah.
We're gonna go with pounds.
Yeah, okay.
We want to measure everything by body parts.
Oh my gosh.
How many human feet does it take to get somewhere?
No, James.
And then a yard, which is not the same as mowing your yard, which is a different yard.
Oh my gosh.
It makes sense.
And miles.
Yeah, miles. Exactly. It's
Possibly.
5,000 something feet. I don't know. It's a mile. A mile.
Sure, okay.
Kilometers are easier.
You know what? Probably. Don't even argue with that. It's true.
It's just with tens.
Look, I'm telling you, the only reason we stick with what we have is because we're hard-headed and we're not going to change.
Man,
and I'm okay
describes
admitting
you
that.
to a T, Lewis.
I'm okay admitting that Americans just refuse to switch. I love the rest of the world's like, why won't you switch? Because we don't fucking want to.
Do they have meters in Canada?
Meters? Yeah, I think so. I think. What? C anal side. Welcome, C anal side. We missed you last week.
Yeah.
They can tell. I'm sure they do metric up there. I think it's just us and there's probably like 2 other places, and it's probably because we own them at some point. It's not as bad as like England, who own like half the world, but I don't know. We should definitely switch. Anyways, let's do sponsor stuff. Katie, you do sponsor stuff while I feed the skink.
Okay. Well, first
that
up.
sounds really dirty. It's a blue tongue.
First up, we have Lil's Shop of Horrors, which operates a commercial feeder breeder facility based out of San Antonio, Texas. They specialize in rats, mice, dubia roaches, Madagascar hissing cockroaches, and more. As feeder breeders, they focus on the nutritional needs of the animals that consume them. They provide feeders for everyone, from first-time keepers with one snake to large-scale breeding operations with many animals, as well as supplying local pet shops. No order is too large or too small. They do weekly meetups throughout South Central Texas and are aiming to expand their meetup locations this year, so be sure to follow them online and keep up to date on their meetup schedule. If you're looking to place an order, feel free to contact them through any of their social media pages at Lil's Shop of Horrors, LILS Shop of Horrors, or email them directly through their inquiries page.
Yeah.
I did the long version since you were busy.
Skink's eating now. We're good.
He's spoiled rotten.
Yes. So check out Lewis over there at Lil's Shop of Horrors. Get you some feeders. Also, check out VivTech products for all your LED UVB light bulb needs. If you're tired of those curly Q bulbs that you have to replace in 6 months because they still give off light, but they don't give off UV, ditch all that. Go with VivTech products and use code Gumbo22 and save 15% on your bulbs or any of your smart devices they sell. Use code Gumbo22. Right? Gumbo22?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's been forever since I've done a promo, but it was like last week.
A lot of stuff has happened between last week
it has.
and this week.
And I apologize. It took forever to get the show out. I tried. My computer said that I had no space left on my C drive. And then I did some things and I freed up space. We're good now. The computer works now and it let me put it out. Also, Herb's Reptile shows. Check out, we got West Monroe, Louisiana coming up this weekend, November 16th and November 17th. Then up to Denison, Texas, November 23rd, November 24th. Then Austin, Texas, December 7th, December 8th. And Slidell, Louisiana is the last Herb show of the year. Get your Christmas presents, December 14th, December 15th. And then starting off the new year, January 11th, January 12th is Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. You know, we're not going there because, one, it's Oklahoma and it's like 7 trillion hours away. So if you live way up north, have fun in Oklahoma. Longview, Texas, January 18th, January 19th. Conroe, Texas, that's my birthday weekend, January 25th, 26th. And then down to Corpus Christi, Texas, February 1st and February 2nd. So come to a Herb show. If we're there, say hi. Come by. Maybe you can be on the show. You can be like Jack and hang out and talk about not reptiles because we tend to not talk about reptiles.
Food, it happens. We talk about reptiles. So
food.
We've already, well, you haven't eaten, but the rest of us have eaten.
I have not eaten. So there may be food talk here. Let's just try to read the chat real quick. And take it over. Oh, go check out. I don't want to. Hold on. Talk amongst yourselves, Katie's.
What do you want me to talk about?
Katie.
I'm trying to compose a letter that will gently let down students who I'm not allowing to join Zoology Club.
I got it. Central Kansas Reptile Expo. Go see the Central Kansas Reptile Expo. I'll tell you the dates. I feel bad because I told Norm that we would do that, and I've dropped the ball. Look, you can't.
I'll make a note of it, and I'll start picking it up on my end.
You know, ends up being a free podcast. I tend to get lazy at episode 240. December 7th, the Central Kansas Reptile Expo. We had Norm on about a month ago, I think. Maybe a little over a month ago. And we talked about the Central Kansas Reptile Expo. And we got to make it up there because that actually seems like it's a pretty good show. And
I have relatives up that way.
okay, that's a reason not to go.
No. I have like relatives I like
Oh, okay.
because I got lots of relatives.
Not lots of relatives you like, though.
There's a handful.
I don't have lots of relatives I like.
It happens.
That's why I moved to Texas. I'm nowhere. I think that's it. Got all this stuff. Anything else going on? I'm trying to think what else is going on lately. Jack, let's give an update on Jack's time in the United States real quick. Jack saw his first what in the wild, Jack?
Oh, my first alligator.
Fucking that was hard. We went to the wrong. All right, so we went to the wrong lake. We've been to that lake before, and it was full of alligators. And we went this time, and there was not a single alligator for most of the time. We ended up seeing a single alligator. We didn't get any bites from any fish unless they were like 3 inches long. It was rough. Apparently, everybody's like, "Yeah, you have to go to this lake." I'm like, "Well, that's not the lake we went to."
Nope.
But we did see about a 6-footer.
Yeah.
Not a huge one, but about a 6-footer.
Pretty good size.
Came like right up to the bank where we were standing, and then we decided not to be those stupid people you see online, and we backed up instead of going, "Hey, let's get closer."
Good
Yeah.
call. Good call.
It was cool to see in the wild, but it took like
It took a while.
2 to 3 hours.
Hey, I guaranteed we'd see one. I didn't say how long it would take to see one.
The funny part is James promised me to see one.
No.
When we were in
No.
the car, when
You
I said-
100% promised him. I heard
No, I didn't.
this.
I said I 99.9% chance. I left room for error.
No.
Right.
Maybe in the car you did, but before that, you and Robert both said,
the
"We'll
most-
go here. We'll see
The
alligators."
most recent promise at the time left room for error.
No.
Yeah, he said in the car, it's a 99.9% chance. The other 1% is if there's
0.1.
all if they're all killed.
And they may have been. Who knows? They may have been. We saw
That's
the
true.
one. We saw the one living one. The
We
winner.
saw one.
Oh my gosh.
That's one more than I saw before.
And then
See a lot this weekend at Croc Encounter.
yeah, this weekend we're gonna go to Croc Encounter, so we'll get to see them there and get to see crocodiles. And I'm still trying to talk Chris into let me feed one of the goats to the crocodile.
No, you're not feeding out the goats.
It's but just picture the scene from
No.
like, Jurassic Park.
The
where goat
answer is no.
sitting there, and then it's not sitting there.
No.
Speaking of all that, I have a Chinese alligator in my kitchen. I know
Oh,
nobody else
God.
mentioned it, so I was gonna go ahead and mention it again. Every episode,
It
I'm
doesn't have to.
I'm
7
obligated.
minutes and 30 seconds.
There's a Chinese
Thanks.
alligator. I fed him just a little bit ago. He's hanging out in the kitchen.
Also, another
How old
animal that is spoiled rotten in this house.
Well, I mean, the Chinese alligator should be spoiled rotten, just because he is my favorite thing in the house. And yeah, that includes y'all.
Why don't you take the trash out? And then maybe your wife can feel spoiled rotten.
if you were a Chinese alligator, I would do that for you.
Out there. Come on, man.
And then our newts, we had to start moving some of the newts out because some of the
Jeez
newts are
Louise.
getting larger.
They're
and,
starting to
and-
eat each other again.
and we had the issue last time where the one ate all of its siblings. Although this time, if one of them were to eat all of their siblings, they would be the size
They
of
would
a
be
crocodile.
Gigantic.
Because there's
There's
200.
so many
There's like
babies.
200 babies in that tank.
There are a lot.
There's a lot. And so we just have to keep moving the bigger ones out as they find out that their siblings are
Yeah.
bite size.
Earlier, Josephine was like, I moved one down to the lower tank because I saw a newt in its belly. And I was like, oh, good call. Good call.
You know,
Way to be
it's-
watching.
It's nature. They're not all meant to make it.
Way to be watching.
Some of them in the wild will apparently get eaten by their siblings.
Good heavens.
True.
So there's that. Let's see. Anything else going on? Anything else that happened over since
We
last
saw
show?
a crispy cottonmouth.
We did see there was a roadkill cottonmouth.
Crispy.
It was very dry and
That was
Oh,
crispy, yeah.
okay.
it was very crispy.
We saw some cool birds.
We saw caracaras. Yeah,
Those are fun.
caracaras are weird. Again, if no one's ever seen a caracara, imagine if a parrot were to have sex with a hawk, and that's a caracara, and then it eats dead stuff. Like it looks really cool, but then it goes and hops on the ground and eats dead stuff. That's
Mhm.
a caracara. They're really cool birds.
Yeah.
So Jack got to see those.
Vultures.
Saw
So
vultures.
Discovery Education is a website that does a lot of stuff with teachers. And a couple weeks ago, they had this cool field trip that you could sign up for. It was virtual, and it's for bats. And it was like all about bats or whatever. And it's only an hour long, but I couldn't do it because my kids were at lunch today during the time. But I registered anyways because it was free. And they sent me this cool video, so I can still watch the video on demand.
And it's
anytime
sponsored
I
by
want to.
Lego.
It is sponsored by Lego. It's supposed to be Build for Bats, and apparently it's supposed to come.
All right. With that said, you're going to help us remember. We're going to give away a Lego set this month.
Okay. I mean, it's only been sitting
Lego
there for
set.
like 6
Forever.
months.
It's got a turtle in it, and you can build. It's got a turtle and some other stuff. We're gonna do it. We just gotta figure. Your goal during this episode is to figure out what people have to do to enter.
For that.
I love
Okay.
that somebody else
Okay,
has a
yes.
job.
That's your job.
There's a puzzle right
Yes.
there too.
I
We
got
can
a
give
job.
Because
both away.
if anybody's listened to the last 239 episodes, you know I don't plan much. This just kind of happens
You don't. never
for
mind.
the last like 3.5
I'm gonna be
years.
nice.
Robert was also telling me, by the way, speaking of bats, I was thinking about that. Robert told me about some kind of bridge in
Oh, there's a
In
bridge.
Austin.
No, and
In
you keep
Houston.
trying to go out of the city. Houston has a bridge with bats.
Yeah, and we drove
fly out
past
from
it, and Robert was like, "Oh, it's so close to my house. Let's go check that out."
How did I not know about that?
I've mentioned it a million times, and you go, "Oh yeah." So apparently, you've gone, "Oh yeah," because you don't listen. You assume I'm talking about the one in Austin or San Antonio,
Very true.
but it's not. There's one in Houston.
It's a cave in San Antonio.
I don't.
We read
care.
about it in class
I
today.
don't care. It's bats.
They're cool. What do you mean you
it's
don't
big
care? Put your
winged-
phone on
big
silent.
winged rats.
Tell your girlfriend to quit calling you.
Travis Wyman was liking my photo.
Close enough.
Doctor Travis Wyman. I forgot to put doctor there so he can feel special.
Oh my gosh.
But he's not a real doctor. If you're sick, don't go see Travis. He's not that kind of doctor.
Oh my gosh.
He's a look, I read a lot of books doctor.
Speaking of doctors, did you see
We should probably-
Dr. Spencer Green's
Bite
post
100.
the other day where he put a red balloon on there? He put a
Oh,
red
9 for
balloon
99?
for 99 red balloons.
Well, it's at 100 snake bites now,
yeah.
or maybe
Yes,
more than that.
it
The other
is.
day I saw it was 100. All right, let's get to our guests. We'll get to our guests. Robert will, by the way, if anybody's listening, Robert will join us whenever he gets to his apartment.
Traffic.
It's traffic. It's Houston, even though he works like 2 minutes away. Anyways, let's get to our guest. Our guest tonight is, and pull it up. There we go. Mark Wilson of the Galapagos Tortoise Alliance. How are you doing, Mark?
Hello, I'm doing great, thanks.
So, Galapagos tortoises, everyone loves them and everybody wants them. But all those people that want them have never owned a giant tractor that can run you over. So tell us about the Galapagos Tortoise Alliance, and then we'll talk about tortoises as pets, because as someone who's worked with tortoises, owns tortoises, and you're the same. I feel a lot of people that don't own tortoises don't know enough about keeping tortoises, especially larger ones, because sulcatas unfortunately are sold like crazy, and I know they're not as big as a galap, but they're far more common. So let's hear about Galapagos Tortoise Alliance and all that, and then we can get into the details on keeping them.
And we're on started actually officially about 6 years ago now, and we're a nonprofit foundation, 501c3, and right now we have 10 locations throughout the United States.
Wow.
And the goal of the Galapagos Tortoise Alliance is to create viable breeding colonies of Galapagos tortoises that are spread out to where one disaster, whether it be biosecurity wise or natural disaster, isn't going to wipe out a species. We genetically test all the tortoises that we deal with, and we try to identify the pure species that we have in our collections. We then sort those into separate breeding groups to help establish those pure species again. The bulk of the Galapagos that you see pretty much in zoos or in captivity at all are pretty much hybrids. I would say probably only a quarter of the galaps that you see in the United States or Europe are actually pure species now. There's actually 12 species of Galapagos currently. Each island in the Galapagos Islands had its own species, and each on the biggest island, for example, Isabella, has 5 volcanoes. Each volcano developed its own species.
So are they they're complete species now and not subspecies?
Well, that's up to debate.
Gotcha.
It keeps changing back and forth. The current AZA listing of Galapagos tortoises, they still subscribe in their listing to the species, but more recently, it was determined by the people that make out the official listing that you should be listed as subspecies. So it's debatable, whether it's subspecies or species. But they were all mixed together originally when people took them out of the Galapagos back, and the big influx was back in 1928 with the Townsend expedition. That's where an awful lot of the old galaps came from. And they were all put together and just mixed in zoos. And the offspring that were produced were hybrids. So what we're trying to do is reestablish the pure species again. So we do genetically test all of ours that are produced to ensure that we've identified properly the ones that are pure. And then we can sort those individual breeding colonies to help reestablish the population of those. Many of them have extremely shallow gene pools or narrow gene pools. So we have very few founders to work with that are still existing. Nothing new has come out of the Galapagos Islands since probably 1961. So the founding animals that we have that are pure are quite old. Some of our best breeding pairs are over 100 years old, still producing babies every year.
Wow.
So they certainly can produce an awfully long time. They live certainly over 150 years or so when kept properly. So we're at the point where we're trying to get these back established. Now, I had the fortune of becoming aligned with an individual who, for probably about 40 years now, has been developing a group of Galapagos that he started realizing that he wanted to develop a long-term program to help preserve the species since they were disappearing. And quite frankly, the zoos really aren't equipped that well to take care of them properly, and don't. And as a result, if we just left what was going on, they basically would pretty much disappear from the world, other than on the Galapagos Islands. And even then, a lot of the species are still fragile. Even though they've done a lot of work in reestablishing some of these species, there still is degradation to the environment. There is still the issue with competitors as far as pigs and rats and goats. And then, of course, on the populated island like Santa Cruz, competition with people. So if we don't do something, we feel like these animals are going to disappear. And I want to be sure they're there for the future. Problem, it's such a long-term process that most of what I'm doing, I'll never see come to fruition. When you talk working with an animal where a generation is over 30 years, it takes a long time to start seeing your generation start building a stable population again. So if we don't have the foresight now to at least lay the groundwork and develop the population to help overcome the narrow genetic base, it'll be too late. So luckily we have enough tortoises that we can create enough population to, we believe, overcome this with good population management. So that's pretty much what we're about doing.
So do y'all work with any conservation group out of Galapagos, or are y'all kind of more planning for eventually hoping to be able to do that, but you're at least building up stock now?
Well, a few of our board members are actually the people that do work directly in the Galapagos. Some of the veterinarians that go there and work in the Galapagos Islands, teaching them what to do and stuff. So we have that we work with, but the bulk of the work we're doing is here in the States. We're trying to develop viable colonies here that are self-sufficient.
I'd be interested. The one that I've always wanted to see, that I always see in pictures and videos, and I've never seen in person, are the big like saddleback ones. That's one that I would love to see in person. Do y'all work with?
Yes, saddlebacks historically have done very poorly in the United States. Most of them that were imported are gone now. So there's very, very, very few saddlebacks left outside of the Galapagos Islands. The bulk of the Galapagos tortoises you're going to see are the domed variety, the Vacinas, the Porterized, the Microphes. That's what you're going to see, Vandenberg.
Yeah, that's the one I always see. I just want to see one saddleback. To me, it's always been a very interesting version of.
They're so cool.
Evolution, just
especially in our group, we are working with Beckeyes, and some of the Beckeyes are a little bit of an intermediate. They have more of a saddleback type of look, a much longer neck that a head that reaches extremely high. So I find them an extremely interesting animal as well. They're the closest to a saddleback that we work with and have enough genetic material to deal with.
And for anybody that's listening, so when we say saddlebacks, if you can picture pretty much any Galapagos tortoise you've probably seen has got a dome shell, where the saddlebacks have evolved to eat things higher up in trees and bushes, and so they literally their shell rises up behind their neck, allowing them to lift their neck higher. And it's an interesting way that you can see. Again, the Galapagos are a crazy group of all islands in general, but Galapagos crazy test of evolution. Just watch everything that's happened there. But it's fun to watch that with the tortoises and just see how different they are from island to island.
Yeah, and
Are the saddlebacks the tallest? I guess tallest with reach. If I look at the pictures, like they're like a lot taller than the regular or the dome-shelled Galapagos that you see.
the saddlebacks evolved on islands that were more sparsely vegetated, hence the ability to reach and browse more than just graze. So as a result, they also tend to be smaller animals. The biggest animals by far are the domed tortoises. They're 2 to 3 times the weight of mature male of what a saddleback mature male would be.
And that makes sense because those islands are going to be full of food. They've got.
Yeah, where they come from, Santa Cruz and the upper volcanoes of Isabela Island, those, quite frankly, are quite lush vegetation islands.
So, I'm imagining. We talked earlier. How many do you currently have at your location? And I guess what is kind of the average amount that you'll have at your different locations, or is there just drastically different?
Well, our idea is to develop, as I said, self-sustaining breeding groups of probably a location that would have anywhere from 12 to 100 tortoises.
Man, that's a lot.
So many tortoises.
A lot of tortoises. Especially when you're talking.
I have around 50 galops here.
Wow.
Man.
In our group, we have over 800. Now, as a comparison, all the AZA facilities combined have about 240 Galapagos.
So the zoo I worked at, we had 3, but they weren't out. If I remember correctly, it's like some doctor owned them, and he had the paperwork for them. And we can talk about that in a second, the legality of owning a Galapagos. I'm sure people are like, hey, how can I have a Galapagos tortoise? And we'll talk about that in a second. But I remember that they weren't ours. That was the one thing.
That must be Humpy.
What was it?
Humpy. At the Brownsville Zoo, the microfiche.
This was in
Louisiana.
Oh, in Louisiana. Okay.
Yeah. I just remember we didn't own them. And then, so we talked about, my God, Robert.
Yeah, we have several tortoises on loan to some of the zoos.
You are very noisy tonight, Robert.
Oh, it's the ice.
There's a lot of sniffs and grunts, and your microphone is.
I got 15 minutes to make up for it.
So our zoo here in Houston just opened a Galapagos exhibit last year. It was last year, I think. And that's one thing we talk about on here whenever we go there is that the only thing at that exhibit that's from the Galapagos are the tortoises, because everything else is protected and they can't have anything else. So everything else is like a similar animal to what you could find in the Galapagos, but at least the tortoises, you go there and it's a Galapagos tortoise. So legality wise, what is the current situation on it being? Because I know people can own them, but there is paperwork that has to be done with it. It's not something you can go to a reptile show and just pick up a Galapagos tortoise usually. So yeah,
they're an ESA listed tortoise, like a radiated tortoise or like an indigo snake. So interstate commerce is forbidden. So if you found someone in your state that had bred the animal and owns it, you could buy it legally if you live in that same state.
Gotcha. That's similar to, I've got Louisiana pine snakes, and I know at one point
you used to have, a CBW permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but it's been several years since they've issued any of those permits to any individuals.
And I think that's what the tortoises we had at our zoo. That's what whoever the doctor was that owned them. That's what he had was the permit to have them, because we didn't have that.
Yeah, they just don't give them out anymore. And of course, what they think governmentally is doing a good thing for the animals is actually restricting any type of project like we have in trying to develop genetic diversity, because what you do is you basically narrow the options you have of creating and getting in some genetically diverse animals to help make the group more stable. So it's actually totally restricted a lot of good breeding programs.
I feel that way all the time when I see with a lot of these protected animals, and especially as someone who worked at zoos, sometimes zoos to me are not the best. It's not a knock on zoos, but they're not the best option. There's a lot of private keepers who probably could breed some of these things much better if they were legally allowed to have them, and if they were part of the pet trade. And I think that unfortunately laws don't take that into consideration.
Yeah, private keepers, good ones. They have their attention can be focused on a single or a few species of animals. They can develop a level of expertise and dote on the animal and spend the time that a zoo can't do. And not only that, our animals are on usually a minimum of 5 acres. And like I said, we found they do much better in larger groups.
Yeah.
I think that's why we're so successful breeding them and have so many, is because if you keep them in a larger group, they do extremely well, but they need to also be on good lush grass, open pastures. If you look at any zoo enclosure, they can't devote the space to a Galapagos that it really entails. So as a result, it ends up living on dry dirt and ends up being fed artificially piles of hay or piles of lettuce or whatever greens they can find and scrounge up. My tortoises graze all day long. And they're very active, and they're most all day they're out walking around grazing constantly.
So
I'm so sorry for sneezing. I tried to get as far away as possible. There was no heads up. Like I had no clue.
I got a button here.
I'm so sorry.
I can mute you at any time if you feel the need.
I'm so sorry.
So how much land are you giving? Are you able to give to adult tortoises, or what would you suggest is probably the best if someone was wanting to keep a large tortoise like that?
I could think you could have a group of a breeding group of 6 adults on a half acre to an acre.
Okay.
I have 5 acres here. Right now, this time of year, with the cold nights we have here in Central California, I have them in half acre pens. I have a barn that's centrally located in my property. And each stall of the barn is fully insulated and heated with door flaps so they can push in and out of the house all day long. And they put themselves away every single night. By sundown, they're in their house. When I made the rounds just before our podcast this evening, every one of the tortoises had put itself away, and I just shut the doors to help a little on the energy bill.
That's how my sulcatas. So we moved to Texas a few years ago, and when we lived in Louisiana, we had a house with a yard, and I had sulcatas. They're now in Texas living with a friend until we can finally get a house with a yard again. But that's what they would do. By about 4 to 5 o'clock every afternoon, they took themselves into their barn and closed in. On cold nights, I'd go and put boards over the thing and strap it on so they don't push out of there and hold the heat in there. But yeah, they put themselves up. That's good. The problem is
having to live on a pasture that is much more humid, which of course helps them tremendously as well. Almost all tortoises benefit dramatically, especially like sulcatas as well, from high humidity. And they really need that. Without it, they just don't do as well. And having them on grass does that. And like here in the summer, of course, I'm a much drier location, but I have a sprinkler system that every hour or so goes on for a few minutes, just wet everything down and keep it humid.
Yeah, that's our next thing. We gotta get this house sold in Louisiana, and then we want to get a house here. I miss having tortoises in my yard. I miss being able to go out and feed tortoises. So let's talk about them kind of. I want to get into our question a little bit, but let's talk as tortoises as pets, because I think the general public who doesn't own a tortoise doesn't think of it. They think of them more like dogs, and I always like to compare like big tortoises, sulcatas, aldabras, galops to like a cow more than a dog. And then a cow that can just break your ankles at any point. Like they'll just walk straight through you. But everybody sees, especially sulcatas, so they get sold in insanely large amounts. I talk about it all the time on the show. It drives me nuts how many sulcatas get sold to the public, and unfortunately how many don't make it to 100 pounds. But what would you say is the most challenging thing when dealing with large tortoises, something 100 pounds or more?
Well, as far as giving them enough room, and the proper environment. Most people keep tortoises way too cool. They let them cool down too much at night. People have gross misconceptions about, quote, what they are exposed to in the wild, and that always makes me cringe a little when people say they're trying to duplicate what they see in the wild, and they take weather data off the internet and assume that that's a good idea of what a tortoise achieves. And there's a couple of big problems with that. Number one, tortoises are masters of hiding from the environment. They live in microclimates. Like a sulcata lives 98% of its life in a burrow. That's 80+% humidity. It doesn't come out in the desert in the heat. It comes out during the monsoon season, and that's when it thrives. They hatch in the monsoon season. They seek puddles out to soak in immediately. And when it dries up, they're underground. And again, tortoises evolved over the last 10 or 20 million years. If we look at what our climate is like, and you look at a sulcata, for example, where I started, almost 40 years ago with sulcatas, and everyone talks about, their natural environment in the Sahel of Africa. Well, what was the Sahel like 5,000 years ago? Now, the sulcata's been there like 8,000 years. 8 million years. So which climate did it actually evolve to thrive in? The one we see today, which is way drier than normal, or the one that was 4,000 years ago when the Sahel was actually a forest? So it's hard to really look at a tortoise that's so long lived and say this is the best environment for it. It evolved an environment that was much more lush, much more humid. And as it dried out, it was a survivor and found a way to survive from hiding in microclimates, burrowing under the ground. And as a result, unless we can duplicate something like that, we're going to have trouble with the animals. When they're bigger, that becomes even more of a problem because it's hard to do that. When they're small, that's where I think most of the breeders I see fail, because a baby tortoise very much needs monsoon conditions.
Yeah.
And because that's the only time they're out is in a monsoon. Otherwise, they're hiding. So
yeah, I literally dug baby sulcatas out of the ground during a hurricane.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fun times.
Little tiny quarter-sized tortoises walking around in the middle of a hurricane.
So like a sulcata needs a heated night house. We don't have the type of climate here. They survive, and they've evolved by having that flat plastron against the ground, which gains or loses heat based upon the ground. Well, where they're from, the ground temperature is normally in the high 70s, low 80s year round. That's where they moderate their temperatures. You put them out in California and figure, oh, they're fine. Well, the ground temperature is 62, or now this time of year 56. So you put them in a house that's not heated, they're going to go down to 56 or so, and that's just a recipe for their metabolism to stop, the food that's in their gut to start rotting, developing enteritis. It'll eventually kill them.
So a lot of people when they deal with sulcatas, the big problem everybody has is with them digging, and I never had that issue because I found that their barn that I built for them basically filled all that needs. It was heated when it needed to be. It was made out of cinder blocks, so it stayed warm from the heat during the day when it was warm parts of the year, and it was dark and safe, and so they never felt the need to burrow. And I find most people, when they talk about they're having an issue with their tortoises wanting to dig, they're missing something. Something is wrong, and they're just not. You can probably fix it with proper housing. I just found that we never had an issue. And when we had them at the zoo too,
yeah,
they didn't dig.
My group of sulcatas did not dig much, although they would. It's natural to them, and they're going to dig. I'll tell you, sulcatas are way more destructive and hard to deal with than a Galapagos.
100%.
A big Galapagos might be 600 pounds plus. My biggest sulcata was about 225 pounds. He was way more destructive.
100%. I totally agree with that. I've been around all of them, and sulcatas are. That's why I find it funny that it's the hobby. There's a lot of animals, and we talked about on the show before. There's a lot of animals because they're cheap. They become popular in the hobby when there are such better alternative animals that you wish would have become more popular first.
If you have the place for them, sulcatas are wonderful. They're like dogs. They love being around you. They see you, they rush over. I always say sulcatas march around their enclosures. Galops plod.
The problem, though, is, like you said, is space.
Yeah, exactly.
And people will just, sometimes people will go, well, I've got a backyard. I'm like, you can't just throw it in your back. Like, you're going to have to plan that backyard. Not just because your backyard is dog proof does not mean it is sulcata proof.
Right.
Your chain link fence is not holding back a sulcata.
No, it's not.
It's going to push straight through there.
No, and when we moved our stuff from the Louisiana house to here in Texas, that was actually one of the things that we made sure we pulled up was all of our panels that we used.
Oh yeah, I brought them with me. So when I put up again,
First of all, they're crazy expensive, but that way, whenever we go to use them again in the future, we'll have them.
But I just, people out there see these big tortoises at shows and they go, oh, that'd be so cool to own. And it is. I've always said they're wonderful pets. Just like you said, if you've got the space for them, they're great pets, but they're definitely not for everybody. And they're definitely not always a great first tortoise. Like, there are so many better tortoises. I'd say redfoots. I think redfoots are one of the best tortoises if you want a moderately sized pet tortoise. I think people underestimate how big 100 pounds is when it gets to, or even not even 100, 80 pounds, 70 pounds when it's a sulcata is a lot of tortoise to deal with. And then you're talking about galops, you're talking about 100, 200, 300 pounds. And that's a whole different, that's a car. It's a small car walking around your backyard.
Yes, it is. One of my favorite tortoises is the Burmese stars.
Yeah.
I have a breeding group of them. I have a breeding group of radiata. But I love the Burmese stars. They're very personable. They're very outgoing tortoises, but they're a very manageable size.
I wish more people would work with, unfortunately, they import them cheap, so they don't, but I wish more people would captive breed Greek tortoises and some of those, and people would start with those more, because I think that's a perfect size for probably 90% of the people that want a tortoise, really, because they live in a house with a small yard or an apartment. Hermans, Russians, all those box turtle sized tortoises, or slightly larger.
You know what I realized the other day? I never gave my box turtle her pumpkin.
Is this still sitting downstairs?
There is a pumpkin on our table, so we need to feed it out. I have a box turtle in my classroom, and every year
she farms pumpkins.
She grows her own pumpkins, and every year I ask my students, "Okay, are we going to take them out so that we can let them keep growing?"
It'll be a whole forest of pumpkins
because it's like 6 inches tall, and they're like, "No, let's just see what she does." Well, I know what she's going to do. She's going to go through and she's going to eat them all one night. We're going to come back the next day, and they're all going to be gone.
She waits to get about 6 inches. And then eats all of them.
Everything. And there's no evidence that they were even there to begin with. And every year for the last 4 years, I have had students, or the last 3 years rather, no, we're not going to keep growing them. Just leave them in there. Let's see what happens. And I've realized, I was like, we haven't done that yet.
Take the pumpkin with you to
I need to do that.
Save some for the rest.
We throw pumpkins out for the galops this time of year. They absolutely love them.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's a great dewormer.
I used to go by the pumpkin patches at the churches, like right after Halloween, and just pick up free pumpkins for my sulcatas. They love them. So I want to go through because I want to get into some of the other issues that you kind of mentioned earlier, but I think some of them will come up in this question. I kind of worded it in a way I wanted people to kind of bring up some of these ideas. But the question I posted for this was, what do you feel are some of the most important parts of captive tortoise care? Because I thought it'd be interesting to hear what some people think. Because I know some of our people that commented don't own tortoises. So a lot of that is stuff they've heard from other people, whether right or wrong. Some of our people on here own tortoises on a larger scale. And so I thought it'd be interesting to see what several of them had to say. So we'll go through them. I'll read them, and then we can kind of discuss it. And if some of those are key points that you want to talk about, feel free. But our buddy Drew Scholes from the Learning Zoo, who has a ton of tortoises at his zoo, he said, for babies, humidity and not spoiling them food wise is important. Low starch, high fiber foods are best, even for species like redfoots that are known for eating lots of fruit. The botanical definition of fruit includes a lot of things that are very low in sugar compared to what we get in the grocery store. A diet that is low in calories and has a lot of fiber has been shown to lead to slower growth compared to lots of starch or sugar, but the bone and the shell is more dense and durable. So we kind of talked about that earlier. We talked about diet. Yeah, people are just wanting to feed it whatever they can get. Again, people go to the grocery store and buy everything for the tortoise, when really grass, if you can get grasses and hays and stuff like that, is really better for that stuff. I'm sure that's something you come across is dietary issues.
High fiber. They need fiber to help move things through their intestinal system. They don't have the motility in their gut like we do. They're constricted by a shell, so their movement, their activity, and then enough fiber to create a bolus that can be moved through the intestine is important. So high fiber is extremely important to a tortoise. High humidity is extremely important. Unfortunately, I think there's in my opinion, a big misconception about diet causing some of the problems as far as pyramiding and stuff is concerned. Diet certainly can cause problems with bone growth, but pyramiding is mostly a humidity issue. That was one of my principal areas of study for years, is what causes pyramiding in tortoises. And I've even done some talks at some of the major reptile conventions on metabolically what actually causes pyramiding to occur in the tortoise, and then how to prevent it. So the diet, tortoises are pretty resilient. It's amazing what they actually eat in the wild when given a choice. They eat carrion anytime they can. They eat other animal feces anytime they run across it. All of those things add dramatically to the ability for them to absorb it. Without enough protein, they won't also get the high bone structure they need as well. So there's a balance there. The biggest missing issue in captivity seems to be high enough humidity. We let the keratin desiccate too quickly when it's forming new.
Do you think as a hobby we don't understand pyramiding enough? I just feel like
it's not. I think we have understood it now, but I think as most all the breeders, most everywhere you go, anything you see on Facebook totally misrepresents it.
Yeah, you'll hear like 7 reasons as to why pyramiding happens, and it'll all be different. And so people are sitting there trying to do 7 different things to their tortoise to try and fix pyramiding. And I think it becomes very muddled in what is actually causing it. And then also, especially on some of those tortoise groups, it becomes a point of contention. They'll just argue it until they're blue in the face, even if have only had a tortoise for a week and they have no idea what it is.
I spent over 40 years growing tortoises side by side in different ways, different diets, different levels of humidity, different temperatures, night temperatures versus day temperatures, side by side, and kept all kinds of records on it until I finally figured out what really was going on pyramiding wise. And then I did a lot of research in metabolically what actually causes it, to see if that matched what I was finding. And it's a fairly involved talk on exactly what causes pyramid and why it's all happening. But yeah, we understand it now, and we know exactly what's doing it. But getting the word out is tough because of what you're saying. Some Facebook sites will ban you for just saying some of the stuff like use a closed chamber and high humidity.
Yeah. Well, and those Facebook groups will ban you if just the person who started it doesn't agree with whatever you say. So
that's exactly why I developed smart enclosures. I designed, engineered, and build and now sell smart enclosures specifically for raising baby tortoises. Everything is fully automated. Everything is, all the electronics, lights, humidity, thermostats, everything comes installed in the enclosure. It breaks down. It's expandable. It's made to hold humidity and heat extremely well and be extremely efficient. I did that because I wanted to give people a way to raise a lot of the baby Burmese stars I was producing properly.
So can you give just a kind of a brief breakdown of how your enclosures size-wise and how they're set up?
Yeah, it's a modular enclosure. The standard enclosure is pretty much 4 foot by 3 foot by 30 inches tall. All of the lighting, thermostats, smart timers, everything is in a compartment inside the enclosure in the front panel, protected from the inside of the enclosure. But you don't have this stack of thermostats and lights and wires and timers sitting on top of the enclosure with all kinds of wires coming out. You only have one wire you plug in. It's made out of PVC. It's double walled to help hold humidity and heat well. So there's 2 layers of 1/4 inch PVC with a 1/2 inch air gap in between. And all of the 6 pieces, top, bottom, sides, front, and back, just slip together. So they can slip apart so you can move the enclosure and slip it back together when you want to rebuild it somewhere else. You can put two of them together to make an 8-foot by 3-foot enclosure, or three of them together to make a 12-foot by 3-foot enclosure.
Oh wow! I found it on your Facebook group. I was just looking at how it slides together. That's awesome. I find if you can make stuff like this modular, it's so much better.
Yeah, and if you're looking at my Facebook page, I also made a point out of putting pictures of tortoises I raised using the techniques I talk about. And most of those tortoises, people never see tortoises grown that perfectly smooth. Absolutely zero pyramiding, whether it's the pancake or the Burmese star, the Indian star, the Galapagos, the sulcata, the leopard, all of them perfectly smooth, absolutely zero pyramiding. Now, another thing you touched on in that question was fast growth. I've found fast growth does not, in my opinion, in my experience, it does not affect the animal.
Gotcha.
In fact, slow growth is harder to manage in a way that actually keeps the animal as healthy in captive conditions. I always give my tortoises all the food they can eat anytime they want. They constantly have food available. I change it out, of course, daily, give them fresh food all the time, fresh water all the time, and a nice soak with their first couple of years every day. But I let them grow. My galops grow probably, again, I keep extensive records. That's the only way I can look back and actually see what's working and what's not. And if you look at the growth of my Galapagos versus what all of the zoos are doing, my galops are at 5 years old, 3 times the size of a typical galop raised in a zoo. And they are smooth, no pyramiding, completely healthy. They're not developing the edema around the neck that has plagued most Galapagos tortoises.
Yeah. It's interesting how fast they can grow, because you hear people, especially when it comes to like other reptiles, things growing too fast. That's one of the concerns. Like some people, especially snakes, and Jack, I'm going to make fun of your group of people, ball python breeders.
Knew it was coming. It's a matter of when.
Raising snakes too fast, and then it shortening lifespans or having other issues later on. And so it's interesting here with tortoises. It's not such an issue, I guess, as long as everything else is met, all the other criteria is met for them. But we're going to go back to some of these answers here. Our friend Becca, who is Drew's wife, also said humidity and then not overdoing D3. And that's another thing, I think, and just across the hobby is the idea of calcium and what calcium and how much calcium. And that's another issue, I'm sure. And I imagine with growth, you have to supply a decent amount of calcium for them as well.
Oh, absolutely. You've got to be sure the diet's balanced and there's enough calcium and there's the availability of D3, whether through sunlight or artificial UV. Artificial UV is a little double-edged sword because too much UVA can also contribute and exacerbate pyramiding a bit, because UVA is a curing agent for, like, people use it to cure their fingernails in a nail salon. It ages your drapes. It's death on paintings. UVA is hard on keratin. And that's why tortoises hide from light most of the time. Most tortoise species in the wild are out early morning, late evening. They don't really bask in the times of days the UV is extensively intense. So we got to be sure that we're moderating it and not trying to overdo it, which again, readings from, quote, the wild, I think are misleading, because we have to look very much at how the tortoise itself behaviorally has adapted to that, not just a UVA reading at 10 a.m. or 12 p.m. or whatever.
Well, yeah, a lot of stuff that doesn't take into account. They'll go take a UV reading in the middle of a field, and yet the tortoises may be laying under the shade during the strongest part of the day, right?
Sure. All my Galapagos, when it's warmer weather, by 9 in the morning, they're all in the shade. They're not out in the sun. They wouldn't be in the sun when the sun's higher part of the day at all.
And And I'm going to use this moment just to give a free plug to VivTech products because they do all their work to make sure their bulbs don't have UVA.
My Burmese stars, they're an interesting tortoise. They come out pretty much at about 5 o'clock in the evening. And then they're out grazing well after dark until about 10 at night. And then they put themselves back away and go to bed. They're not out in the middle of the day at all.
And see, that's important information because a lot of people think reptiles, they think reptiles and it's got to be hot. But I mean, if you've kept enough different types of species, you realize that is not the case for a large variety of reptiles, right?
Right.
And especially when that's the problem with tortoises, though. Again, sulcatas being the number one thing, they'll compare every other tortoise. If it works for a sulcata, it works for all tortoises, and it's drastically different between a redfoot and a sulcata are drastically different, and then definitely the Burmese stars and some of those other ones are drastically different for a sulcata.
Robert's computer just completely crashed on him, by the way.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, he just texted us.
Okay, I wonder where he went.
Yeah.
Well,
he had a lot other colorful words in his text message, but that's
going through some of the other answers. Timothy said space and proper diet and lighting, which we kind of talked about already. Those are important. I guess I'll read my dad's. I just got Mark. I haven't read this yet. I'm just gonna preface it, whatever it says. It's just ignore it. My dad says it's very important that that you sucker your dad into using a power auger to make holes for 4x4 posts for a fence. Rumor has it that he is still hurting from that little escapade. And oh yeah, don't forget that one of the tortoises has absolutely got to pee on him as he's carrying it to the truck. Yeah,
that was true. It did pee on him.
It does. That was when we built my last tortoise yard, and we did get a power auger, but a power auger still doesn't go through a tree root, which we found several of those right where we wanted to put the post. But and then you pick up any tortoise that's going to pee on you. I found that every time I take a tortoise for an educational program, I always hold a napkin or a paper towel underneath it because it's or I keep it like over the container because it's going to pee every time.
Some do, some don't. None of my galops pee on me.
Maybe it's a sulcata thing because they pee left and right.
Well, a lot of tortoises do, but I think once they're used to the routine, they stop doing that. I'll tell you one thing, Galapagos drink more than any tortoise I've ever seen. Gosh, do they drink.
Our buddy Nathan.
Box turtle doesn't.
The box turtle?
The box turtle doesn't pee on us. We take her out all the time.
You're lucky.
She doesn't. Now, we have noticed that we don't let her, because we just let her like randomly walk around our classroom too. I mean, we pick everything up first. Like we make sure it's safe for her. But we've noticed that we won't do that like the day after she eats a really big meal because then she poops on the floor.
Go figure.
But other than that, yeah, all that movement gets her pooping.
Our buddy Nathan said, I think turtles really need some good outside time in pesticide-free areas during the day. Offers of proper sun, bugs to chase, natural foraging of grass and weeds, etc. Simple yet extremely beneficial. We kind of talked about that. It's again, that's outside time is very important for many reasons.
But interestingly, in our side-by-side tests and studies, we found that when you talk about a baby tortoise, its first year in particular, it will do far better in an indoor controlled environment than in the best outdoor pen you can provide.
I see that. I can get that. It's definitely much easier to meet all the criteria needed for those.
Yeah, it's hard to create the microclimates they would naturally gravitate towards in a small space. And by small, I even mean a 20 by 20, 20 by 50 backyard. But in a good enclosure, you can create the type of conditions that they need. The sun is so desiccating, and behaviorally, if they become too used to you and they're no longer afraid of predators, they'll start becoming used to being out when normally a tortoise wouldn't be out. And as a result, it starts becoming too desiccating on it, and it's very hazardous to a young tortoise its first year. You'll find, that's a big problem.
It's those microclimate ideas. It drives me. So I have no problem with people having naturalistic enclosures, and that's great. And this means any reptile. And I think they're really cool if you can do them. But I think it's funny when people want to bash someone else who is supplying all the right levels of everything, light, humidity, everything, but it may not be this big naturalistic bioactive enclosure, but they'll bash them for it because it's not naturalistic. And they're like, you need to recreate what they have in the wild. And I'm like, guys, we're keeping reptiles in boxes in our house. It's not the wild. There's nothing you're doing is the same as the wild. You don't have the temperature changes throughout the year the way it is. You don't have rain showing up here and there. You don't have. It's not the wild. So
it's kind of interesting too, because you're trying to duplicate what they have in the wild, but in the wild, less than 1% of the baby tortoises survive.
Yeah, so you should kill.
Yeah, so let's create an environment in which most all of them will die.
That's what we did with our newts downstairs. That's why we raised them that way. We let one eat all of them, so it was very natural. We ended up with one big newt and a bunch of gone babies, and very natural.
Crazy.
Natural selection.
That's natural. But it just always kills me. I'm like, we're trying to provide the best possible setup that you can give to these babies or to any of these animals. The wild is not a nice place. Like, if you really wanted it to be like the wild, put some predators in there and crank the temps up to 130 degrees and sometimes, and like flood it and just do all of these things that you would not want to do to your animal if you want the wild.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Some of the tortoises, when they hatch, they just have to be lucky to hit a good year with the right amount of rain and cloud and stuff like that to survive. There's years when none of them survive. The whole nest dies out. So the wild is very harsh.
Yeah. I think just show people videos of baby sea turtles trying to make it for the first 10 minutes of their life.
See, by and large, tortoises survive in leftover habitats. They've been evolved, and mammals have done much better than they have.
Yeah.
And they've been out-competed in all the prime areas. So as a result, they've been driven to these marginal areas where it's very tough to survive, where you're not going to find all the predators, all the animals, all the competing rats and other animals. So as a result, that's where the tortoises are left. And it's a very tough place to live. Most don't make it. It's not there because they're there by choice, I believe. It's there because that's where they aren't being outcompeted. So as a result, in these marginal territories, they've found little niches where they can hang on and survive until the climate changes in another 10,000 years. And it maybe becomes more humid now, more wet, and there's more areas of forestation. But until then, they've found these ways of surviving in extremely marginal habitats. I choose not to recreate that habitat for them. I envision the habitat a tortoise would actually have thrived in 5,000 years ago at the height of its evolutionary process. That's the conditions I want to give it.
Well, yeah, go watch the David Attenborough Galapagos 3-part special and watch the tortoises roaming across large lava fields and just dying from dehydration and death because they can't get back to grass and all that. That's the wild. You can recreate that. Just throw it in a cage on some lava rock. Don't give it water and watch it die. That's the wild.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy. And that's also you talked about it earlier. They're tough animals. Tortoises and turtles in general, of all the reptiles, to me, turtles and tortoises in general are the toughest. And that unfortunately is their downfall in the pet trade. They can unfortunately handle a lot of crap. And I've got one sulcata that we name him Notch because he literally has a giant notch in the side of him from just horrible. He probably never got UV. He probably only ate apples. I mean, it was bad when we got him, and his shell looks messed up. And every time I post a picture online, people are like, "Your tortoise looks horrible." I'm like, I know he does. He did when I got him. I didn't do this to him, but they can live through that stuff. I've seen some horrible sulcatas that still live through just bad care, and that's kind of their downfalls. They can, unfortunately. But hopefully people will learn.
Well, it's kind of like the other thing with reptiles, especially with tortoises, is if they're severe enough that you need to take them to the vet, a lot of times at that point it's too late, because for them to really be showing those symptoms of being that sick where you're like, oh, I should probably, I mean, not for people like us necessarily, because we're going to pay way more attention to our animals than the normal average human. But that's something to consider. Birds are another animal. that don't show a lot of symptoms. Guinea pigs are real susceptible to human head colds. Like if you get the flu, you can give it to your guinea pig and you don't know that your guinea pig is sick until it's really too late to do anything to save them.
Yeah, with tortoises, behavioral changes, and then more importantly, I weighed them regularly, and a change in their weight gain pattern is going to be an early indicator of something wrong. You're right. By the time there's anything visibly wrong, it's normally too late.
So that's always been my problem. My fear for tortoises and turtles sold as pets is that, you know, you always hear the story of someone had a turtle in a 10-gallon tank and they had it in there for years. I'm like, yeah, unfortunately they're tough and they can do that, and it's not good for them. And then, you know, it's the whole, well, it only grew to the size of the tank. I'm like, no, it just eventually died small. Like you slowly killed it. But yeah, you'll see. And I'm sure you've seen them. Some of the shells of some of those rescue sulcatas are so rough, and you're just like, how is this thing still alive? Like I've seen some that look like giant pancake tortoises, and yet they're still alive.
It's amazing what they can survive. Totally lose a leg and still survive. And I mean, yeah, they're amazingly resilient animals.
And to a fault, unfortunately, in the hobby, you know, because someone will go, well, I've kept it this way for a long time. I'm like, doesn't mean it's right. But let's see. Our friend Megan wrote a book here. Let's see what she said. Proper diet. She says it's infuriating watching people throw some lettuce into too small of an enclosure and then wonder why their tortoise isn't healthy. She keeps redfoots. They get a wide variety of vegetables throughout the week and occasionally fruit. They also eat mice, chicken. Too many people mistakenly think they're herbivores. Also supplement with Missouri pellets, but fresh vegetables make up 85% of the diet. Which I would say I'd probably do more grass than fresh vegetables, but and then understand the species you brought home. Stop acting shocked when you bring home a sulcata and find out they love to dig, or realize they'll be getting over 100 pounds. Also realize they're not an indoor dog house pet. I can't stand seeing someone post a picture or a video of their tortoise roaming their house. And first off, I've seen a tortoise shit and pee.
Yeah.
I don't want that in my house.
Nope.
The noise alone that comes out of them when they go to the bathroom. I don't want to be sitting on my couch and just hearing that happen somewhere on the floor in my house. And the holes they'll put through stuff, because again, they are small bulldozers. If they want to go through something, they're going through it. Sulcatas. CJ Harris said giving baby tortoises a great start by providing high humidity environment and a varied diet, which we've mentioned. Jack, you said good UV lights, which is important. Good UV light and the proper amount of UV light. And then Jessica Coleman, who we had on, said she does rescues as well. Space. Every tortoise I've ever had has benefited from more space to roam. Give them as much space as you possibly can safely at the right size. Yeah. So most of those points, though, that people said are things that we've mentioned that unfortunately people go to a show and buy a tortoise and throw it in a 10-gallon tank when they get home and go, hey, I've got a tortoise. And that is not the right setup for a tortoise. But yeah.
Yeah, diet's very important, obviously. And unfortunately, most people are, especially like in wintertime, times of the year where there's not a lot of weeds outside to harvest, you're forced to go to the grocery store and try to get greens for it. And you know, it's tough to create a good diet for them year round. So I actually use a lot of the dried goods that are available now online. Like dried moringa leaves, dried mulberry leaves. And you can, if you have to use grocery store greens, you can sprinkle some of that on top of the greens for the day, mix it in. It sticks to the greens, and it's extremely high in nutrition because a dried green, not only is it coming from extremely nutritious plant like the moringa, which is like a miracle plant almost, or mulberry, super high in calcium, but because it's dried, it has over 10 times the nutritional density of what a regular green is going to have. Yeah. So adding just a little bit that to the salad for the day can totally change the dietary complex of what you're feeding out. So stuff like that's, I think, very important to use to help bridge the times of year where you can't harvest your backyard weeds.
Well, and the other thing is, and someone talked about not spoiling them, you know, the sulcatas, and Katie knows this because whenever she went out to the tortoise yard wearing flip flops and red toenail polish,
I don't ever wear real shoes. That's a problem.
sulcatas, yes, they
They
love
look like cherry tomatoes.
They love cherry tomatoes and red apples, and people will go, well, they love them, and that's all they want to start feeding them. I'm like, you can't. That's not. You've got to where. Okay, if we're gonna try and recreate the wild, where in the wild are they finding a giant pile of tomatoes all the time?
Right.
That's not it. But I don't think enough people feed grasses to their stuff. They don't feed enough. Again, you said fiber, right? Which is one reason I like having the Missouri. I like the Missouri food. It gives you if you're in a pinch and you can't get stuff, it does have a well balanced amount of fiber in there. But then, like Megan said, knowing the tortoise you have, because again, feeding sulcatas and feeding redfoots are not the same thing, right? My redfoots need protein. Like, don't get me wrong, a sulcata will definitely eat it, but the redfoots need protein. They
Yes,
are not
absolutely.
they are not a straight on herbivore. Darren said, keep the tortoise in your basement with the alligator. Duh. Yeah, of course. If you live up north, just get an alligator and a tortoise and keep them in your basement with a big floodlight, and you'll be fine. They'll grow great. I did want to go back to Darren asked a question earlier, and I wanted to ask you about it, and I forgot. How far back was it? It was. I don't want to lie. I'm scrolling. It was something about how many. Oh, here it is. How many pure clutches of Galapagos tortoises are produced each year, roughly?
Are you talking about our group or what?
Yeah, we'll go your group, since that's probably a number I imagine you know much better.
Well, if you look at AZA data, all of the zoos in the AZA last year probably hatched. Actually, I was just going over that this morning, but as I recall, I think 8 tortoises. And I think last year was similar to that the year before.
Oh wow.
That's a low number.
Yeah. Out of all the AZA zoos and stuff, they do focus on producing as much of the pure ones as possible, and they try not to incubate hybrids. So they are focused on that segment. We find a good Galapagos tortoise. She's going to lay anywhere from 2, 3, maybe even 4 clutches in a year, and a clutch is anywhere from 10 to 20 eggs. We'll probably get I don't know, 40 clutches a year.
Wow.
Or more. We usually have fertility on a lot of our young females. A lot of our females are fairly young, so fertility is low. So that's something that's always a struggle with Galapagos tortoises, is getting higher fertility rates. The pure animals tend to have much higher fertility rates than the hybrids do, from what we're seeing. There is a need and a place for hybrids as far as Galapagos are concerned. In a large group of tortoises, if you just have a few pures, putting in some female hybrids takes a lot of the stress off the pure females from an actively breeding male or two. So there's certainly a place for some of the hybrids, but again, the focus is to try to reestablish the pure strains. So I guess the answer to the question is, if you have a good female, she's going to lay 2, 3 clutches a year and probably 10 to 20 eggs a clutch.
So out of that 10 to 20 eggs, though, how many actually hatch?
Well, with a good female, a pure female, we're seeing 80 to 90% hatch rates. With some of the young females, they can be total dud clutches. Several of our clutches will just not hatch at all. They're infertile eggs.
Okay.
The biggest challenge, it seems, right now outside of the Galapagos Islands, and maybe even there, is good fertile males. There's an extreme shortage of good producing fertile males. I would say there's roughly 6 or 8 of them that we know of.
Oh wow. That's okay. That's a much lower number than I was expecting.
Now, part of it is you put them in a large group, one of the males is going to become dominant and the others are subservient to it. And he'll want to keep all the females. He'll actually not let another male in the night house with him. He'll let his favorite females in with the night house with him, but he won't let competing males in with them. So you have to create other quarters for the other males if you have more than a few of them together. So part of that is the challenge in keeping large tortoises.
Yes, especially sulcatas. They love to fight. God, do they
But
love to
part
fight.
of that fighting, and even with galops, they don't fight like sulcatas do. They kind of stand towards each other, open their mouths at each other, and whoever can raise their head the highest wins.
Yeah.
It's usually not a very combative type of fight. It's a
Do you need
disorder.
like that kind of competition to make sure that the male breeds, or can you also just keep one male with a group of females?
Well, that's part of what I was getting at. Actually, that's a good question. Is I believe there's an advantage to having that competition, getting the testosterone going. I think most tortoise groups that I've experienced, even like with my radiata, where the males do fight quite a bit, I think they do better when there is that competition that's there. And at least some of the time, they have that competition with other males. That's why, again, I say, I think a lot of our success is because we keep large groups together.
Yeah.
We don't just put 2, 3, 4 galops in a small enclosure.
Yeah, because most zoos are going to do a male and 2 females, or a male and 3 females, and
Well, again, they have a different scenario. They can't devote the space and real estate to a tortoise when they have elephants and zebras and lions and tigers. That's going to draw more people and create more revenue. It's a different scenario for a zoo than a private breeder. It's one of the reasons why private breeders can do so much better for a species like this.
do y'all get any? So, and I know how the AZA is in some situations. Have they reached out to y'all at all? Do y'all work with them at all? Because they're not huge fans usually of the private sector.
Yeah, there's a segment of zoos that very much work with us, and they're very much proponents of what we're doing. There's also a lot of zoos that feel no tortoise should belong in the hands of a private individual, period.
Yeah. So I have Louisiana pine snakes, and I have a friend, the one I got them from in Louisiana. He breeds them better than probably anybody on earth. Like it's crazy how many he can produce. But and he offered when because the New Orleans Zoo works with him. And he said, look, and he knew the guys that work. He said, I reproduce them. I can get you some, and you can add them to the stock, and you can release them, whatever. And they refused to ever let him release any or do any of that because they said they couldn't trace the bloodlines. And his thing was, I can drive you to the part of the forest I collected their parents from 30 years ago. He's like, I can take you to where they came from, but they wouldn't do it. And I'm just like, this guy, I mean, he had from a snake that normally only lays 3 eggs, he had a female lay 11 eggs one year. I mean, he just gets tons of babies. And it just always drives me crazy when I see that stuff happen. I'm like, guys, just suck up your pride, reach out, vet these people if you need to, but realize that a lot of these private keepers can do this better than you. And it's not a knock on the zoos. Again, like you said, they're busy and they have an entire reptile collection, not, a giant collection of just Galapagos tortoises for the main part, or just a collection of pine snakes, right? So I don't know.
Well, they have a collection of all kinds of animals, and
yeah,
again, their agenda is very different than a private breeder. A private breeder, as I mentioned a long time ago in our talking, can spend the time and resources on specific animals that a zoo cannot. We dote over Galapagos. I give Galapagos 5 acres. One of our facilities is 40 acres that we have Galapagos on. I mean, a zoo's not going to devote that to animals.
No, because I'm just imagining 40 acres.
Let alone the attention to the detail, the ongoing research, record keeping that we do, that we carry forward, instead of having newer keepers that come on board in a zoo, a lot of which are volunteers, changing and turning over. It's the nature of that environment. So it's tough. Now, some of the zoos have some long-term keepers that have been the tortoise person. Those are the ones that tend to do the best.
Yeah.
For me, I've have 63 years of dealing with tortoises, and that experience does help, especially when you keep track of what works, what doesn't, and carry forward and aren't afraid to change.
Well, it's so our friend Chris Dieter there's a crocodile zoo that's like 20 minutes from our house called Crocodile Encounter, and his house is literally in the middle of the zoo. and he probably breeds more Chinese alligators than anyone else in the country, maybe leaning on the world. Breeds a ton of them. But luckily he's been able, some of these AZ zoos have reached out to him, and he's able to like get some of those animals into places they got to go. But it's a small collection. He spends a lot of time with it. He's there all the time. He sees these animals. He can take care of them and do it. But I mean, he had enough of them that I currently have one in my kitchen. So, yeah, I just wish that hopefully as time goes and more will happen, and they'll reach out more and more to the private sector, because I'd like to see some of this. And then the other part of the private sector worries me is outpricing ourselves in some of these animals from being able to do conservation work with them. Some of these animals are just so expensive, and the one I always point out is like the Boland's python. Right, the Boland's python's like $8,000, $9,000 for one, and if you're wanting to get a pair, and if it's like a situation like the tortoises where another male might help you combat and help, okay, well then I'm having to pay for an extra male. It's another $9,000. It's very hard in some of these cases for these animals that are so expensive to even get them into the right hands to see if someone could try and get them breeding and get populations going.
Yeah, and I think a good example of the benefit that can be there is like the Burmese star I talked about earlier. That animal was declared functionally extinct in the wild many years ago. And in conversing with the main keeper of the sanctuaries in Myanmar, where the tortoises are from, she said as fast as they can release animals into the wild, they get poached, no matter what they do, even with the high security and stuff. So it's very hard to make it work. But yet, if you look at what private breeders have done, the prices come down tremendously on them now. And there's a lot of people now that are out there breeding those from what we've learned. A lot of the research and study we did into proper diapause-ing the eggs and how to incubate them properly, how to start them properly, and then how to raise the animal, they create an extremely good animal now, and they're not going to go extinct. They might be extinct in the wild, but that animal, that Burmese star is to me a star as far as how to keep an animal from going extinct.
That's another one I think is a great example. Well, partially, there's a lot of that also die thanks to Minecraft. But at the axolotl, right? The axolotl is almost extinct in the wild. It's found in one little spot, one little lake, and no one really knows how many are left there. But the amount of axolotls that are in captivity is insane. And we've been able to reproduce them like crazy. And it's important to be able to, even though if it's little Jimmy getting a little white axolotl to keep at his house, it's still important to have these animals existing. And that's one where the pet trade really helped that. The pet trade's like, oh, we couldn't breed these things, so we can get lots of them. So it's important to be able to do that.
Do you guys ever sell the tortoises that you produce? Because if I hear like one female can produce like 3 clutches, 20 eggs, do you all keep like all the pure Galapagos yourself and bring them to other places, or do you also sell them to the pet trade?
No, as of now, this time, we've never sold any of our animals. We keep them all in our breeding groups. Now, we certainly have provisions, and I think ultimately the plan is that there will be some surplus animals. And it is a very expensive endeavor to ask an individual to develop a breeding group, a large breeding group of Galapagos tortoises, have the land and the finances for irrigation, heating, and all that. It's an expensive endeavor. So as a result, to have the ability to probably sell some surplus animals for some of our individuals to help offset some of their costs is something we certainly have provisions for. But at this point, we've not sold any.
I guess that's the dream, is to have too many. Like, oh no, we have too many. Now we can sell some to help pay for
it's a double-edged sword, because we would certainly vet very carefully anyone that was considered getting one, because we don't want to see them as, quote, just a pet tortoise out there. We think there's a special type of individual that really would want to take care of properly a Galapagos tortoise. And again, I really would hate to see one being raised individually. I think they do better in a group. So I'd love to see them in situations where they are in small groups at least. Otherwise, they just don't learn the social skills, quite frankly, of getting together. If you try to bring into a group you have a Galapagos tortoise that was raised individually by someone who had one as a pet, you'll find that tortoise does extremely poorly for quite a while. It just doesn't know how to interact with the other tortoises. It didn't develop the skills And quite frankly, oftentimes it's also doesn't even act the same way with its people keepers that a normal Galapagos tortoise would. So I believe there's a lot of learning that they have in growing up in a group. So I think there's a certain type of person that should have a Galap if, we're looking at that.
So I think you got to look at things like Galops, Aldabras, and I think Sulcatas should be looked that way, but they're not. Or things like big water monitors and stuff like that, as an investment. And I don't mean an investment as I want returns on my investment money-wise, but it's not the same as getting a leopard gecko, right? It's an investment of time, and you're looking at getting this animal that's something that you're going to have for a long time, that you're planning on putting a lot into, just as in it's set up and taken care of properly. Not that you shouldn't do that for your leopard gecko or bearded dragon. You most definitely should. But it's a different level when you're talking about something that the tortoise that's going to live 150 years, right? It's going to have to be left to somebody. You're not going to have it its entire life. But there should be more thought put into getting it. And like I said, I wish that was done with sulcatas. And the problem is that they produce so well, and they're so cute as babies. And again, I don't know how many actually make it to not even adulthood. How many actually make it to 5 years old? Or screw that, 2 years old.
Yeah, and sulcata is of course pretty cheap to buy, because in Europe, I see on the shows in the Netherlands where I'm from, you see the Galapagos tortoise and the Aldabras. You can sometimes buy them on like the reptile expos. They're like, for a baby like this big, I guess it's like €2,500 to buy a Galap or an Aldabra. And even if they're even just a little bigger, you see the number go up and up. So a lot of people, I think, if the prices were higher of the animals, a lot of people would think better about just buying one, because how much is a sulcata? Like 50.
I mean, if
euros?
you could probably get it for $20 in the right situation.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, wholesale, they're cheap, really cheap.
Yeah. So that's much more of how do you say it? Like, buy it on a whim, just
they see it as
look where it goes.
I don't say disposable. I don't think everyone goes into buying a cheap animal and thinking, oh, if it dies, I don't care. But I definitely am with you. And I hate having to put a price on an animal to make it seem important. But unfortunately, that's kind of the world we're in. If someone spends more on something, they're more likely to take care of it better than if they spent less on it. The general, not everybody. I get it. There's some people out there that bought a cheap little sulcata at a show, and it now has the best life on earth. But that's one out of I don't know how many.
It's not the norm.
Yeah.
That's the exception.
And the problem is we do look at Galops and Aldabras because they do come with that price tag differently. But I mean, we're still talking about the third largest species of tortoise on earth when we talk about sulcatas. We're talking about something that can get 200 pounds or more, and people don't put that same thought into it. And I don't. The problem is, it's just money. The problem is money.
Yeah. I need to say, I would love to have like a Galapagos tortoise, because I think it's the most cool one there is. But I just went with the red foot just because I know I can give it the right care and the right space to really make sure that this has a good life.
500 pounds.
And whatever we plan on doing, whatever we think our plans are for the tortoise, as you say, it's going to live 150 plus years, hopefully.
Yeah.
And things change. I mean, the tortoises I have right now are going to outlive my grandkids' grandkids.
Yeah.
So who knows what situation they're going to find themselves in. So the way I raise the animal now, both its social ability to deal with other tortoises, to possibly breed down the road, even though someone might not have that goal at all in mind now, who knows what's going to happen in 80 years when you're gone and your grandkids are dealing with it. So it's a long-term project to look at, and things change. And even sulcatas, you talk about third largest tortoise in the world. If you talk about Sudanese sulcatas,
yeah,
you can get those 300-400 pounds.
Yeah, I mean again, people see that little tiny silver dollar size baby at an expo and they go, "Oh, $40, I'll get that 20-gallon tank. That's fine." I'm like, "That's okay. That's fine. You set up in a 20-gallon tank. That's great for like 6 months, and then what are you going to do? It no longer fits in that, but they'll keep it in that for 3 years, right? And they'll keep it with the one curly Q. They go, well, I've got a light for it, and it's If at best it's the little curly Q UVB bulb that no longer actually gives the UV, but if we're telling the truth, it's probably a red light bulb they bought from a kit at Petco. So they're like, yeah, it's not going to get big because you're feeding it water-filled lettuce underneath a red light inside your air-conditioned house. I mean, it's just not going to be the best situation for that tortoise. And you see that, unfortunately, all the time. But I don't know. I don't know the fix for it. I just know that it drives me nuts. There's the Klondike Kid Exotics in our chat. It says they enjoy their Aldabra. I'm sure you do. I'd love an Aldabra. I also would love the yard for an Aldabra, or just for my sulcatas again. Because they are like you said, they are dog-like in nature, and that they come to you and the pet. But again, I think people don't understand. They're not dog-like in nature. That they're not that. They're gonna walk through your fence. They're gonna break your leg. They're gonna break your foot if you're not careful. Like. There are many times where I just had to move out of the way.
They're not going to do it on purpose or to be mean to you. Okay, I take that back.
I disagree.
Speedy 100%.
Our sulcata 100% is doing it on purpose. He's an asshole. He knows what he's doing.
But they're not. I don't think they're vicious animals.
No, they just do. Especially when you're talking about an Aldabra or Galapagos. Once they hit 400, 500 pounds, they do what they want, and you just kind of have to go along with them, hoping they do what they want, and it matches what you want them to do.
They are definitely the gentle giants. They don't have a mean bone in their body. They love attention. They love to be petted, especially as they get older. You know, all you have to do is walk out in the pasture and they just stand up tall, stretch their neck out, want you to come over and rub them and pet them. They are the neatest, most personable animals out there, and they're gentle, slow giants that just live forever. I don't want to see them disappear.
That's the two things I miss the most from working in a zoo is crocodilians, which I've got my fix now, and giant tortoises. I miss going in and just being able, because we had Big Al was our big Aldabra, and he would come in, you go in there, stand up on all fours, stretch out, like you said, stretch his neck out, and he'd let you scratch up and down his neck and rub on, and he loved every bit of it. And yet it's now, again, my big sulcata is not as friendly. If he wants to go through you, he just goes through you.
You see that?
Oh, that is awesome.
Awesome.
Yes, I miss doing that. I miss going out and just because they're enjoying it. It's not like you're forcing, like you're rubbing their shell and they're hiding inside of it like it's a Red Ear Slider or something. Like they want you to come out and pet them.
Yep.
And then I also love
it becomes hard to do projects out in the yard because I'm out there digging a trench or something, and then they all come over to want to see what you're doing, and they want to help, and all they do is get in the way.
Yes.
And like you said, it's hard to move a 200+ pound animal.
I don't think people understand how hard. Like it's like a 400+ pound Aldabra or Galop, you can't move. Like it's in theory, you're like, oh, we could lift it. If three of us were to grab it, where are you going to grab it? Like you just can't. You can't move them. We used to have to. I would take the end of like a broomstick and just go out and just like lightly tap its shell, and he's like, "Oh, okay, it's time to get up." And then you just kind of keep tapping it if he goes in the right direction. But every now and then you're like, "Oh, I'll stand on the side of it and stop him from turning right." No, you're not. He's just going to turn right through you.
A piece of cactus also always works.
Sometimes I have found they're not always food motivated if they don't want to be.
Yeah, fair.
Again, they're food motivated, but if they're well fed all the time, now the sulcatas, I can usually get them with a red ball. Just be like, look, it's a tomato. I can get them to follow me. I'm gonna have to say sulcatas are not as smart as Aldabras and Galops. I'm just saying it. They're not as smart. They're cool. Love them as pets. I'm just not saying that. Same way ball pythons aren't that intelligent.
That's definitely true.
But again, when it comes to pet tortoises, I wish more people would just do research. There's a million pet tortoises that are better for people's situations than the large 3 or 4 if you want to add, mountain like Burmese mountain tortoise, which I really want a black Burmese mountain tortoise. But like, I wish pancake tortoises weren't popular. I think pancake tortoises are awesome little pet tortoises. They've gotten insanely expensive in the last several years, but anyways, that's my soapbox on tortoises. And stop buying ball pythons.
But not from me.
I have a group of pancakes. I really enjoy those. They're neat tortoises. and they're a good enclosure tortoise. You know,
Yes.
they can
Miss my
live their
pancake.
lives in an enclosure. I have some spider tortoises also. And
Oh,
really
those are
enjoy
cool.
those. Yeah,
Aren't those are a protected one, right? Spiders.
they're what?
They're a protected one, right? Are
Yeah.
they CITES?
Yeah, they're not ESA listed yet. They probably will be soon, but right now they're not. But
How big
yeah,
are they
they're
full
one
grown?
of the smallest tortoises.
Yeah,
So I've got the biggest and one of the smallest.
because they fit in like the palm of your hand, full grown, right?
Oh yeah, full grown. My full grown male is what, 4.5, 5 inches?
But they probably only lay like a handful of eggs though, if they ever whenever they do lay eggs.
Yeah, just a couple of pancakes, only one at a time.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about spider tortoises, they also give you the winter off though, because they go pretty much dormant for about 3 months.
Well, that's the other thing I don't think people realize. Like when they have sulcatas, they're like, all right, well, I'll put them inside for the winter. That's great, but they don't hibernate. Like all you've done is put them inside. They still want food. They're still gonna poop. They don't hibernate. Just because you think they should and it gets cold where you live, they don't shut down. So I don't think a lot of people think about that either, because it was always tricky when our Aldabra was like when at the zoo, and it was because their inside room was not. It was probably nice when they first built that area, and the tortoises weren't huge, but getting in there to clean out hay after they've been inside for 3 days because it's too cold and you can't get them outside at all is a nightmare when you're dealing with 4 to 5 large Aldabras who don't want to get out of the way. Also, I think that's something. Go look at large tortoise poop, or even small tortoise poop, because small tortoises have large poop. Before you think like I want a cute tortoise, I can't explain how large the poop is coming out of a sulcata. That's only the size of like a basketball, but the poop is massive. It's like the size of a softball, and you're like, how does it do that?
But that's even with my redfoot.
Yeah,
it's almost as long as its shell itself.
But you talked about earlier, they'll also eat anything. Like, so it was always funny. My dogs would eat the tortoise poop, and my tortoises, if they could, would try to eat the dog poop. I'm like, stop eating each other's poop, guys. Come on, get it together. Also, while we're on this talk of big poop, toad poop. Toad poop is massive.
Every now and then it'll be on the front porch.
Well, always like you see in like these neighborhood groups, like, what pooped on my front porch? It's got to be a cat or a fox or something. Nope, that's a toad. That's just a toad. They just have really big poops. Like, they're mostly poop when they're hopping around. So, anyways, all right. So, is there anything else that we have not brought up, Mark, that you want to make sure that we mention about Galapagos tortoise or tortoises in general?
Oh, I think we've been over a lot of stuff. There's always, I mean, I can talk tortoises for days. So
they're an awesome pet. I just wish people would do them right. You know, people were like, why don't you bring your sulcatas to your house? I'm like, one, I rent. My yard is the size of this table, and it wouldn't be right. Whereas I can take them to my friend's house, who has a yard much larger for sulcatas, and I can wait until I can have them back again.
Yeah, most people, I think, grossly underestimate the amount of room they need. A lot of tortoise keepers start as other reptile keepers, and if they look at a snake or a lizard and the amount of room that requires versus what a tortoise, even a small tortoise, needs, it's very, very different. Tortoises need movement. They need to be able to walk and move around daily. You know, a small tortoise still needs a 3 foot by 6 foot enclosure, you know, something big enough, but yet you have to control its environment and the heat and the humidity properly as well. So that becomes the problem. People look at, like you say, a $40 sulcata. Well, to set it up properly, it's going to cost you $1,000.
Yeah. Well, that's why I always make fun of bearded dragons too, right? Bearded dragons are great. I don't think they're a great beginner pet, because that cheap bearded dragon does not go in a cheap cage. To set up a bearded dragon, it's very similar to sulcata. You need a larger cage than you think you do, and they're very like, you know, there's not a, in my mind, there's not a cheap reptile. I guess we've gotten to the point where like crested geckos is kind of like the cheapest you could set one up, because you can do it at room temperature, and you can set them up in a tank like the one size behind me, and they'll be fine. But most of them, the setup is crazy, especially when you're doing something like a tortoise, just because of the space and the UV requirements and the heat requirements and all the stuff that goes with it. I I wish people would stop going to a pet expo and going, "What's the cheapest thing you have?"
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I don't know, this toy, this snake toy that you can get. That's the cheapest thing. Buy this, take it out and play with it. So.
Yeah. Are you guys open for the public, or do private tours at your facility, or is it just for yourself to enjoy?
That's a double-edged sword. I'm actually developing an education center that I want to open up. The biggest problem has always been security. We always have to be very concerned about security at our locations. So most everyone that's in our group doesn't let people know where they are, and even that they have Galapagos a lot of times. So that's always a challenge. I'm choosing to be more of upfront as far as I do reptile expos. I have a display where I bring in a couple of younger galops for people to see. I have a big display on what we're about and what we do. And I want to open at the facility here that I have an education center where I can sponsor field trips from the local schools, and then have people come out and spend an afternoon petting some galops and actually get to interact with the animals as well. So that is definitely part of what my plans are, but I will say most of our locations, though, are closed.
I get that. And unfortunately, it's the world you live in. You hear animals getting stolen all the time here or there.
Yeah.
You can only imagine if someone knew you had 100 Galapagos tortoises and they know the price tag on a Galapagos tortoise, unfortunately, and then like, oh, look, I can go make a quick buck here or there. And then you always worry, like, what always scares me when someone steals animals is they're not stealing it to take care of it. And I'm like, oh, what happens to that animal if they don't sell it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Have you thought about like putting some like livestock guardian dogs? Would that something? I'm like a very big dog guy, so that's why I ask. Like, if you would have a facility,
Oh yeah.
would you lay like a big Anatolian Shepherd between the Galapagos and just make sure they're
We're
protected?
talking security fencing, security gates, dogs, cameras. Yeah, always.
That's cool.
And giant guard tortoises.
Giant, yeah.
The trick is you just got to get them all up to 600 pounds so they're hard to steal.
So nobody can take them.
You got to get them giant enough that you can't just throw it over your shoulder and take it out. All right. Katie, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm sorry. I've been multitasking and doing stuff for school, and I was confirming t-shirt orders for student council.
That sounds boring.
And 3 of the parents
That sounds horrible.
didn't follow the directions. I don't know why it surprises me, because Fuji's make Fuji's and their kids don't follow directions either.
You got to explain Fuji's make Fuji's. People don't understand that.
Like apples make apples.
Yeah. Apples don't fall far from the tree. They get,
Yeah.
not everybody gets that.
Well,
Could be talking
now
about
I know
camera.
why the kids don't follow directions.
Could be talking about the camera.
So I have
Fuji
to
camera.
email these parents and say, hey, because you didn't do this correctly, your kid's not getting a shirt tomorrow. They'll get it next week.
Can you say, hey, because you suck at this? Calm down.
Sorry for talking so much tonight, guys.
Robert, you speak.
Hey, Robert.
Robert, could you please be quiet?
Well, yeah, I already apologized in the Discord too. Sorry, I started my day off by tripping over a boot and slamming my knee into a door jamb.
Oh,
Hey, don't
And
do
it
that.
It just went downhill from there today.
Don't do that.
Oh, dude, my knee looks like a cantaloupe right now.
Don't do that.
Yeah, I hope to not do it again.
You want to give everybody let's do an update on what's on Robert's 3D printer. Robert, what is 3D printing right now?
I just finished the beginning of Darth Vader's sword, his lightsaber. I still have to do it has a ton of stuff on it.
Yeah, because there's missing a lot of
Print
black
all that.
accents that go on there.
Yeah, but this is silver, like actual silver. So
Looks good.
yeah, it's going to look good. When
that's
it's done.
really cool. That's what you should look into getting for the Mandalorian.
I'm going to do the Mandalorian nativity scene in silver.
Yeah.
I
I told him if he made it, I'd hang it
I
up. in the
ordered it
house.
at 7:00 this morning and had it by 10. You have to love Amazon.
I got to work and got a message on my phone from my 3D printer that I was out of filament halfway through a print job.
Yeah.
And then I got a message from
mistake.
Jay if I could pick some up for him.
And you saved the day.
And then you saved
Jack.
the day by bringing black filament so I could finish my print job.
It was my first time at Micro Center, and
Is it awesome?
that's awesome. Yeah.
Isn't-
You probably can't see this very well, but it's a They call it a war pug.
Is he holding a knife in his mouth?
He is totally
Yeah.
holding a knife.
I've seen-
Hilarious.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you got another week now in the U.S. What is something that has happened that you're like, okay, I didn't realize that's how it was here. Besides having to sit all day at your Airbnb waiting for them to change a lock because the key was underneath the couch the entire time.
Did you tell them? Did you tell
I
them that?
definitely didn't.
So
Allegedly.
just background on this. So Jack has now gone to his third location since he's been here. It's an apartment, right?
Yes.
Right. So he gets there. There's no key. The door's unlocked.
Well, we got there Sunday night and walked. It took us forever to get in the gate because they didn't send in the gate code. And he finally got the gate code. So we got in and we went back there and we opened the lockbox and no key. So Jack just is like, and tries the door and it just opens. So
And then
I
all the
went in
next
and made
day,
sure no one was hiding in the shower or anything like that.
Yeah.
and then all the next day, you're trying to get them to get you a key, and then you find out that the problem is the person before left.
What they
With the key.
first told me, it was at 7 a.m. I texted them like, "Hey, any word on the key yet?" No, there's not. They called me. The previous tenant would have taken the key home with them. Okay, so
So now
Like
you
a-
don't know who has a key. to
so
the apartment
yeah,
you're in.
that was the problem. So at first I was thinking, okay, just get me a key and then it's fine. But as time went on and I talked to it like you guys, I was like, wait, so someone has the key to my apartment, so when I leave, anyone can just come in and just steal my stuff. So then I texted them, and it was like 7 hours later. I texted them like, hey, you need to change the lock because everybody can just walk into my apartment now.
Uh-huh.
And then they told me, oh no, the person lost it in the place. That's why the door was unlocked. And now we're working on getting you a new lock. But instead of just telling me that in the morning so I could start looking, they told me that at like 5 afternoon. So what I did, I was looking and stuff, and I was talking to my girlfriend on the phone, and she was like, oh, look under the couch. So I looked under the couch, and within 5 minutes, I had the key.
Well,
But then
what
I
was-
was
What was funny is you and I both looked under the couch cushions,
yeah, but not
Remember-
under the couch.
and then we were like, "Oh no, they if they dropped it anywhere, it'd be in the couch cushions." We never thought to actually look under the couch.
No, so that's why. And now they said to me like, oh, we're going to change the locks at 8 at night. So I was like, okay, fine. And then at 9, I texted them again like, why aren't you here? I want to go to sleep. This is crazy. Give me my money back. I was really angry. And then finally at 10, they changed my lock. And I was like, okay, this key is now mine. And I'm going to take it back to the Netherlands. It's my souvenir.
Absolutely. A
It's not
crazy
mine.
time.
Yeah.
So the
The,
entire
the
day.
people with the herp shows can tell you some fun stories about me and some baseball moms at a hotel one time. And
Anyway, we
I
usually
get shit done.
we
I'm
usually
just
go
saying.
It's great.
They use me as the bad guy. I play
yeah,
the
the
role
entire-
very well.
In the shower in my room and heard Katie yelling in
I was-
the foyer.
I got shit done, and we
Yes,
all got
you
to
did.
sleep. Okay.
That's good.
But yeah, an entire day in the U.S. wasted waiting for them to change a lock.
Yeah.
Ah.
But what's also weird here, you guys don't have like in the Netherlands when we have bottles, like plastic bottles. If we bring it back to the store, we get like money back. You pay that when you buy the bottle, but you also get back when you get it back. But here, that's not a thing. Now I
Californ-
bring my bottles
California does that,
to
right?
So we're
Katie.
recycling.
But doesn't California do that where you can like take because there's like always a thing on the side like in California it's this much for a bottle.
Yep.
Yeah, we just don't do it here because
So
in the south we said fuck it, the rest of the world can just rot.
Well, I
But-
recycle.
But out west, when you get to like California and Oregon and Washington, where all the hippies are, they did that. It's been a while.
Oh, so that's why, because I was looking on the bottles and on the side it says like
Cash
5
refund,
cents.
yeah, cash refund. in
Also,
California.
so that's why I asked Katie.
Oh,
I
look
text,
at there.
how have you not noticed that?
in Oregon and Michigan.
Yeah,
I texted Katie like,
California.
"Hey, is that a thing here?" No, that's not
Oh.
a thing. So
It's not- Something
In
here.
Vermont,
it's a thing there.
Connecticut,
yeah, and in the Netherlands as well, and in Germany it's on
New
like
York.
tuna cans and everything.
there's also places that
Never
So,
paid
Mark-
attention.
Mark, can y'all pump your own gas where you live?
Oh yeah, you have to.
Okay, because I know like
Are
Yeah.
there still self-service gas
no,
stations?
it's not still. It's a new thing. Like in Oregon, I think parts of Oregon and Washington, you can't.
Oregon just
pump-
passed the law, I think, a couple of years ago where you can pump your own gas.
Oh, they finally do it. For a while, it was you couldn't pump your own gas.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I didn't think that was coming back.
The thing's going away now, so they'll let you pump your own
That's
gas.
pretty neat. Wonder if it was something they did during COVID to keep people.
No, that was the
from
thing.
touching
Oregon.
The
No, Oregon did that for
No.
years. That was how it was.
Oh,
New
they're not
Jersey is the only state in the United States where it is illegal to pump your own gas.
Yeah.
Wow.
Where's Darren in the chat? He can tell us all about the weird ass state of New Jersey.
Oregon recently lifted its 72-year-old ban on self-service
Yeah.
gas.
My dad said when they went up there to
wow.
Oregon when I was a kid, they went up there for a football game, and yeah, that was one of the things. Also, when they were tailgating, they have these machines. They have these machines around where you can just go put your cans and your bottles and get change and get refunds.
Yeah.
And so, like all these little kids would walk around the tailgate areas, and if you laid down a cup or a bottle, they would just
It was
take it.
gone.
And so
So,
the
you
kids were
better
making-
hope you were done with your
So
drink.
the kids were making money. So if you laid something down, the kids went and they would go put them in the machines and make
That's
money.
fabulous.
That's why they also put like the refunds on the bottles and cans and stuff in the Netherlands and in Germany, because you see a lot of homeless people, like they clean the streets to make like an extra bit of cash to like this way, so it cleans.
Imagine how
itself.
clean the streets of Houston would be if we had that. Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you'll never see on the streets of Houston is aluminum cans, because they can.
You can.
can, yes.
And I was telling Jack that we do get cash for aluminum.
Aluminum.
But
You say aluminum?
anything else,
Aluminium.
paper,
Stop that.
plastic,
Shut up.
whatever, they just leave it.
Yeah. I recycle plastic and paper. So
So we still got plans for Jack in America. We're gonna take you to Reptilandia over the Thanksgiving break.
Yes.
we're gonna have real Thanksgiving, which we need to
Jack,
plan a menu
Jack is
for.
staying for Thanksgiving. He's gonna have a real American Thanksgiving. Katie's excited because she can have
I get to
sweet
cook
potato casserole.
all the things. I don't like well, I am gonna make a casserole. I don't like sweet potato pie, but I like sweet potato casserole.
Yeah, which is sweet potatoes and marshmallows. It's
Pretty much.
fucking weird.
I like
Sounds
it.
good.
I'll eat it if you don't like it.
You get
I
hash brown.
am going to talk to Jack, but I want to see if he wants to go check out a Brazilian steakhouse tomorrow night, so then he can
Yeah.
see
Yes.
free refills on meat.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's pretty
Jack,
great
Jack
stuff.
has been
Mark,
been
one of the
happy
things
about-
that has amazed Jack in the U.S. is that we have free refills on our drinks at restaurants.
Yeah,
So,
they don't have free refills over there.
That's
Yeah.
how we make money in the Netherlands.
Yeah,
So there's that. We are going to take Jack to shoot a gun. That is coming up.
this weekend.
Jack. So you've never shot a handgun.
I never shot
Any gun.
a gun.
Any gun.
We'll fix that.
And
Something
we're
they
going to
teach you at
crocodile
the-
encounters.
We're going to Crocodile
As
Encounter.
soon as you can hold a gun in Alabama, you
We're-
learn how to shoot it.
We're going to Reptilandia, which is the coolest reptile zoo on earth.
We're going to a football game.
We're going to a football game.
The zoo at some point.
We're going to the zoo. You can see our Galapagos tortoises.
And
Yes.
the new pygmy hippo.
Oh yeah, we did get a new.
There's a new pygmy hippo at the Houston Zoo.
And we still need to talk to Jim about seeing his facility.
Go to see his blackhead pythons.
Yep.
And so yeah, we still got lots. We
A
still got,
lot of plans.
we still got what? 3 weeks? 3 weeks of you here, right?
Two.
Yep.
2.
3 this week, next week, and then Thanksgiving.
Well,
week.
the rest of this week,
Well, it's
and
only
then 2
Tuesday.
full weeks.
Yes.
Oh my God, it's only.
I will leave the
Tuesday.
30th in the afternoon.
Millie is
Supposed to-
sad. You hear her whining.
Yeah, he said. Darren said Jersey they can't pump gas. Darren, I haven't gone hog hunting yet. I'm not taking him hog hunting. I haven't even done it.
I would want to do that.
Oh, I want to also. All
What?
right.
What kind of
let's-
licenses you have to do that since you're not from here?
I don't know what he would
He
need.
could
That's what
buy
I'm
a
saying.
he could buy a 3-day hunting license.
Even from being out of the country. Oh, well, there you go.
And it's pigs. You can shoot the shit out of those things. They don't care. Kill them all.
Just saying.
All right. Let's let Mark get out of here. We've had him here for forever. Mark, thanks for coming on. If people want to learn more about the Galapagos Tortoise Alliance in any way that might be able to help or get educated on it,
Yeah, we have a Facebook page, Galapagos Tortoise Alliance.
so go check it out. Shoot them any questions. Tell them, hey, I want to buy a. I'm just kidding. Don't ask them for buying a Galapagos tortoise. Don't do that. Don't do it. Not yet. Wait till they have their surplus of their entire army of Galapagos tortoises. It's gonna be great. We're gonna be like, we have more Galapagos tortoises in the U.S. than we do in the Galapagos. But next week we will be back. Ooh, I do have a guest for next week. I forgot. I have one. We're good. We'll be back with Jack. Jack will be back with us next week.
Back at it again.
Because what else is he gonna do besides sit at his apartment waiting for someone to bring him a key?
Hey, I'll be here next week because my meeting got canceled.
Hey, Katie will be here next week. So, and maybe Robert will talk next week.
Robert's mute.
I just followed Galapagos Tortoise.
Galapagos Tortoise.
Yeah.
Yeah, go get everybody give them a follow.
Yeah.
It's such fun to
No
go look at
problem.
Galapagos Tortoise. Thanks everybody in the chat for hanging out. Mark, if you'll wait 1 second. Thanks for coming. We'll be back next week. And good night.
Bye.
They can still see us.